Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But as midnight, there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" The Gospel of the Lord. So it's clear that none of us like to wait. We become a culture that demands instant gratification. How many times in the past week have you gone to Google to get an answer to a question? From recipes for the best pumpkin pie to how big the planet Mars is, it's all right there, information just waiting at our fingertips that can instantly be retrieved. And when we don't find the answers right away, or don't get what we want quickly enough, we start getting nervous or anxious, as if having to wait means we'll never know the answer, or rather that we'll never be satisfied. Now think about the election this past week. I'm sure I'm not the only one who was concerned with not knowing the results on election night. And even after multiple sources told us it's going to happen, don't worry, we'll know the results for a few days yet, we expected immediate results. And even though we knew the votes were being continued to be counted, we wanted to know now. Even after our votes were cast and all that was left to do was to wait, we still wanted immediate satisfaction. Now, some of us even began to doubt the election process as if somehow it wasn't enough to be patiently waiting and trusting others to do their job. Now, some of us were probably shaking our fists at the TV as if that was going to change anything. Did anyone else get frustrated text messages from friends or family? I know I did. I probably sent a few myself. Now, election aside, whatever we want it now. If that's not enough, we want the newest, the best. We want the latest and the greatest. And we all want it right now. It's as if our world has been identified by that one word, now. We want it now. Right now. Now. Give it to me. But I wonder if we haven't gone so far to the extreme of wanting instant action or answers that we have diminished our ability to accept life as it really is, or see others as they really are. And I wonder if in the long run, we're not making ourselves more simple-minded by demanding so much instant gratification. And here's what I mean by this. Earlier this week, I came across a discussion on NPR of how 2 well-researched experiments were combined to show clear indicators of growth and success. The study suggests that delayed gratification may lead to more sustainable innovation and success. It started with taking a well-established and long-researched study that concluded long ago that hard work and persistent effort helps to grow the brain. And that is, we can make ourselves smarter and more successful through hard work, dedication, and follow-through. It's called neuroplasticity. This is the brain's capacity to always, throughout life, make new connections, new neural pathways that make us smarter and more aware. Now, that particular study was applied to a more famous psychology experiment called the Marshmallow test. Anybody heard of that? In its simplest form, this test is when you bring a child into a room and you offer him or her a treat, like a marshmallow. You then tell the child if they wait for 5 minutes without eating, they can then have 2 marshmallows. The reason this experiment has become so famous is that for as long as it's been around, over time, it was clearly shown that the kids who were able to hold off eating the first marshmallow for the 5 minutes had better educational outcomes, were typically more adjusted to handle life difficulties, and they had more successful careers and years down the road. So the basic conclusion of combining these two tests is that our ability to delay gratification, that is, to do the hard thing first to get the payoff later, makes a person more productive, successful, and resilient. Pitted against our overzealous need for instant reward, this becomes a profound statement in the importance of patience and persistence. And when we are willing to take a few extra minutes to apply ourselves or wait for the reward, we are in fact improving ourselves. But what does this all have to do with the bridesmaids, or Jesus and keeping awake, as we heard in this morning's gospel? For starters, there are clear implications in how we grow in our relationship with God. Now, to be clear, the parable of the bridesmaids is tricky. It's not one that simply comes to us right off the bat, because there's a lot going on there. But for starters, I don't think Jesus really wants us pondering over questions such as, why did Jesus close the door on them? How could Jesus do that? Why would he close the door on anyone? We already know the answer to those questions. He doesn't. He doesn't close the door on anyone. Not the prostitute, not the tax collector, not the sinner. His door is always open. And Jesus has repeatedly told us, not only this morning, but throughout the entire Gospels, that he is always with us to the end of age. No waiting required. He is here. And here's that word, now. He's here now and forever and always. So it's not about him closing doors. It's about Jesus calling us to wake up and keep awake. And to be awake means to be aware of our dependence on God. Now, despite our overstimulations, electronic devices, addictions to the internet and social media, and our endless quest for the newest, the best, the most, we tend to make our way through life sleepwalking. For the most part, we remain unaware of the spiritual dimension in our lives that is God. Like the bridesmaids in this morning's gospel, we let the spiritual part of our life wait. We tell ourselves that there will be time for spiritual growth later. Why do I need to do it now? Especially if it's not growing quick enough to fit our demands. Or, and here's a really tricky thing, we see that spiritual life is something we need to acquire or earn, or better yet, purchase. We buy and consume books. We watch TV shows. We do whatever we can to get our hands on what we think gives us our spirituality. We consume. But none of these activities quench our desire and need for an awareness of our spiritual self. In the midst of all this working on our spiritual life, we are still distracting and distancing ourselves from experiencing it. We can't buy spirituality. We can't acquire spirituality. We have to be spiritual. We have to experience spirituality. We have to experience sitting and simply being in the moment with God. That's the type of now we should focus on. Persistently waiting and listening, Jesus knows this and calls us to wake up. Now, once we are awake, we are to stay awake. And staying awake is about growing in our awareness of God. Since we know that we can grow our brains to develop new habits and awarenesses, What is the spiritual equivalence of persistently staying spiritually awake? Well, as it turns out, that another way to encourage and promote neuroplasticity is to do nothing. Not less, nothing. Let the world around you inform you. And all religious traditions have some form of mindfulness, meditation, and contemplation as a religious or spiritual practice. Contemplative prayer or mindfulness helps us to create an empty space within us. If we allow it, sitting in worship can be a contemplative experience. However you find that contemplation, however you find the mindfulness, just know that it gives God and the Spirit a point of entry into otherwise busy and sleepwalking lives where we seek immediate answers. And once we prepare a place for God to dwell within us, we become more aware and awake to the fact that God has been and is always with us and doesn't require God's immediate response for us to faithfully know that God is there. The time and effort put into doing less and doing nothing will awaken us to the clever truth buried deep, deep within the tale of lamps and oils and bridesmaids. And here it is. God's door is open to all, at all times of day and at all times of night. We just need to wake up. And when we wake up to this truth and all things are made new, including, most importantly, ourselves. For it's in this context, the lesson for this morning is very straightforward. Jesus is reminding us that we must live our lives as true children of God. Of course, we're human, and we'll sin. We'll make mistakes. We will certainly trip and stumble along the way. And we will have times when we don't share our oil, or so to speak. Whether that's because of our selfishness, our own unpreparedness. But overall, we must seriously examine our hearts and souls each day and strive, and be persistent to be a witness to God's love. Perhaps that could be the reason the bridegroom doesn't recognize the 5 foolish virgins. Would God recognize us as children of God right now, today, when all we crave for is immediate answers? Is that really preparing us for God, if we are unable to listen and wait? Or would God see that Sunday in church is the only time we think about God or our spiritual lives? Our faith is not a practice of instant gratification. It comes with patience and time and persistence. Every one of us must begin each day with the resolve to live as a child of God. It is not easy. It's probably the hardest thing we do. And we were reminded last week in the Beatitudes that those who do it often suffer for it. Remember the line, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Well, for there to be peacemakers, this means that there has to be a conflict present. And conflict, or conflicts, are never easy. But the peace gained from hard work is well worth it. We must be the ones who stop seeking instant gratification and recognize that there is hard work ahead for all of us. That hard work of forgiveness, reconciliation, and acceptance is merely the start. And just as studies have shown with our brain development and its potential to consistently and constantly grow and expand that comes from willingness to be steady and determined, so too is it with our spiritual muscles and the world we seek to improve. All of it points towards God's presence in everything we do. We must be the ones who now demonstrate a willingness to wait and be persistently patient with each other and with what God is showing us in our lives and with what is happening in the world around us. It is through our daily kindness, our willingness to share our oil, whatever that might look for each of us. It is through our example of what's important in our lives that we will gradually and permanently change the world with our patience, our kindness, and our persistence. No matter how much we want the marshmallow right now, God teaches us that the persistence of staying awake and waiting and preparing ourselves for that day to come is when we will get the bigger marshmallow. And that will always be the true reward. And regardless of what satisfaction we want or the need to be instantly rewarded for our choices, we need to wait. We must remember that while we need to be awake in our treatment of others and to love our neighbors as ourselves as we are called, we must awaken to the simple truth that God is the one who is in control and has the answers we seek. Or, as our new president-elect reminded us last night, you who dwell in the shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadows for life, say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock, and whom I trust. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, and make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. Amen.